Hi, this is a walkthrough of using the microbiome prescription site done exclusively at a user request as a video. The person suffers from chronic fatigue syndrome, which means usually cognitive issues, and the person expressed problems with reading, so she made a reasonable request to do a video, hence this one. Okay, so we have the data uploaded. You can see it's from bottom site. And the first thing I usually do is take a look right here. Right here says a fair amount because person has chronic fatigue syndrome, and usually what happens all the time is that this percentile range, 0 to 9 percentile, is grossly overrepresentative. And the worse it is, usually the worse the chronic fatigue syndrome is. This table, in theory, with a normal microbiome, should have roughly the same number in each one of these 10 percentile ranges. I refer to it as the percentages of percentile, which is sort of a bit of a mouthful, but basically we have bacteria which have token amounts which are grossly overrepresentative. And down below we identify things which are perhaps key bacteria to take a look at. But let's go on and take a look at the health analysis. First thing is we have the anti-inflammatory bacteria score, a new feature added because somebody else asked a good question which we realized I could answer. And what we see is person is down at 17 percentile, which means that she has a lot less bacteria producing things to reduce inflammation than most people. Hence, probably chronic fatigue syndrome has a high amount of inflammation for her, which has all sorts of consequences, including impacting blood flows to the brain. If the veins are inflamed, you are not going to get much blood being pushed through them. It can also impact blood pressure. Again, think of it this way: normal veins, now it's inflamed, which means that a whole bunch of behaviors change, including probably POTS. There. Now, the next thing down is looking at potential medical conditions done. And there we have to take a look comparing prevalence and the percentile. Something like hay fever here, she is 100th percentile. She has most of the bacteria associated with hay fever. 7.8% of people have hay fever, or at least that's the best estimate I could find, which means it's likely she has it. High blood fat is also possible, although with chronic fatigue syndrome things tend to be complicated. Type 1 diabetes, 96%, but only a small percentage have it, so it's probably not a match. Chronic fatigue syndrome, 96 percentile, 3% of people have it. It is likely a match, and especially when you consider that we probably overrepresented in our samples with chronic fatigue syndrome people or long COVID people, which is going to skew the percentile. So it's a likely match, which is correct. Allergies is the same thing. Number one, which is high percentile, but very rarely occurs. So I would dismiss it. Irritable bowel syndrome, very often comorbid with chronic fatigue syndrome. Their rheumatoid arthritis tends to develop. It occurs about 1%, 693. A little bit of concern, mainly because of the comorbidness of it. Eczema, probably low enough, and constipation is more likely to happen. So those are the things which are suggested by using clinical studies, published clinical studies of what gets shifted with different conditions and how this person ranks. We now below have a couple of things which are generally the bacteria deemed unhealthy. Remember, we already identified that one of her problems is not having enough anti-inflammatory bacteria. These will probably cause a fair amount of the inflammation, and what we are trying to do is make sure we have enough bacteria which will counter the inflammation. Go down to Jason Harleck's suggestion, we're 89 percentile, and what we find is This is one of the anti-inflammation bacteria, bifidobacterium, and that is very low. Another one is lactobacillus. Another one is roseburia, low. She does have this one just barely over there, so that adds some anti-inflammatory, but it's a low percent. It is a low percentile in a range. It is in range, but no idea. So most of the stuff being pointed out here are there, and of course here we have something which we identify up above, 63% major overgrowth, 3 times the desired numbers. So that is a quick analysis of it. Now when we go over to here, we do a very simple, we could go through and we could add in symptoms, etc., which will help it. In fact, I got a pending adjustment to incorporate symptoms and just give me suggestions. It's not there yet, but it's on my backlog. And we just click here. And it spins a while because it's doing 4 sets of algorithms to calculate what's going on. We now have our simplified brain fog suggestion indicating things should take or not take there, and now we have things like antibiotics, one of which here is very commonly used with chronic fatigue syndrome, and then we have supplements, etc., things to avoid takes. This is the dumbed down version of it. We also have more technical details here, and with this one can go through and take a look at things there. One thing I should point out is the nicotine here sort of came up, and I sort of always scratched my head. It's part of the literature. And then somebody emailed me who found they had a major improvement, almost a complete remission, by using a nicotine patch on the arm, which is something which I tend to mention no, not demonstrated, etc. But since nicotine is high there, nicotine does alter the microbiome, and nicotine patch is probably a lot healthier than smoking. Then that is interesting. Then we also have garlic there, oregano. So we have a bunch of things which are all in the same category. We can now go over, and one of the first things I tend to do is, going back to changing microbiome, is take a look at 2 things. One is suggested probiotics, which calculates it for particular enzymes which you're not producing. Usually I look for values which are over 150, and most of these are available in Germany. One probiotic, which is Prescript Assist, which is why they're in the list. E. coli here, which is there. E. coli you can get as Mutaflor or Semiflor 2, both are coming out of Germany. But I also check to see if anything else in the top list is common. We see Bacillus subtilis here is on the list. But generally the numbers are relatively low, which means I tend not to put as much weight on them as on the other thing. The other thing is the supplements, which is to identify things where the amount being produced and the amount being consumed is out of whack. And we have something called a Z-score here. And the Z-score, the higher or the more negative the numbers, to be more precise, the more significant it. And these are supplements which are available as supplements in some countries of the world, not all countries. And it gives you a list of things which will probably help. And I point this out, and in the blog that comes with it, I double check, and every single item specified here with our quick suggestion comes in as a positive. So in other words, looks like this list is a good list. And we go back, and now let's check out and do the basic suggestion. One of the first things I often do, because getting antibiotics is usually a challenge for most people, is check probiotics. And guess what? Bacillus subtilis is the first one, and that was also relatively high in the list of probiotics suggested using ketoconazole, which is a totally different way of deriving it. This is based on clinical studies. The other way is based on the genetics of the bacteria you have. And then we have a bunch of bifidobacterium there. The lactobacillus there, I tend to be always careful of. By putting in this name here, you can see whether or not it is good or not. And by itself, it's nasty. With cellular voice, it comes out positive. Generally, in this type of scenario where you have contradictory, depending on whether or not it has some extra ingredients or not, is I would say forget it. Just don't bother with it, which is exactly what I wrote in my suggestion. So we have Bifidal pseudocarnaticum, we have Infantus, we have Breva. We also have Casey, which is well studied for being able to improve allergies. And since allergy count for bacteria is high, I'm not surprised it's showing up there is a good suggestion. We also have Rotera here, which fortunately the Biogia is known to be a non-lactic acid producing one. Generally, when dealing with lactobacillus, you want to make sure that the explicit strain has been tested for being a D-lactic acid producer. If it is a producer, it will increase brain fog, which is not what you want to do. Which is also why I tend not to recommend lactobacillus. Rotary is, the Biogia is a good one, that is known. The Casey, I don't know explicitly, but it is well documented for reducing allergy aspects, so I would be inclined to put that in as a secondary choice. Some of the other ones you may or may not be able to find in isolation. I should at this point hop over and do let's just take a look at a couple of them. I'm just going to look up there. So I have the list here, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this particular one there. And I don't see it's available as a retail probiotic, which is unfortunate. Let's take a look at the next one. And it is available as a retail probiotic. Let me move myself. In 24 different probiotics are there. So we have right there that particular product, assuming you are able to get it. Unfortunately, you know what we have over here? It says it's a known histamine producer. So if there's a histamine issue, you probably should know. But we do have it available as a retail one. So that is a possibility, assuming you can actually do it. But also it produces D-lactic acid, which means brain fog issue. So again, it may be computer to be suggested solely on the basis of impact on bacteria. It does not look at issues such as whether or not brain fog is involved or histamine allergies are involved, which is why you need to do some cross-check. And then bifidos do not produce D-lactic acid, which means that they are generally safe ones. So I would go with the bifidobacterium. My own usual preference is to do the best source, and right now the best source is Custom Probiotics, and it has things like Bifidus brevis sitting there, and they're expensive, but the number of dosages you get is pretty big, and the dosage is significant. In fact, generally doing 3 child scoops a day, one with each meal, is usually more than sufficient. and we have 0.8 grams. And how much do we get in it? We get 50 grams, which means that you are looking at about 60 full-size dosages or 2 months supply. Again, you can go in and take a look at the other ones with the longum or with the impetus. We do have samples there, but that is usually it. Finding where it is, I try to help as much as I can. I cannot always guarantee finding them. We have other ones sitting here which are probably safe. Again, main caution is lactobacillus and lactic acid. The Reteri is one coming from the Valgia. It's a safe one. From other sources, we don't know if it will or not be. So be aware of that. Okay, so now the rest of the things is just basically going in and clicking through, taking a look at things you should do. Also, the thing you want to do is also take a look at things you want to avoid. For example, stevia, apple, xylem, psyllium, low-fat diet, nuts, and remember, peanuts and nuts are different creatures. Wheat bran, saccharin. Looks like this person should be having lots of real sugar or sucrose. Pork, spearmint. So there's a list of here, and these are things which are good to just check to see if you currently include them by default, and if you do, you may want to reduce them. And similarly, what you should include. Again, these are suggestions. You should take a look at them, come up with a short list, and then discuss it with your doctor. Things like lactic acid is something I'm aware of. You may have other medical conditions that some of the substances may not play well with. So take care. And that is basically it. Just exploring and taking a look. And one keyword I should re-emphasize is the highest value is 625, which means you really want to keep to items which are 300 and above, which means basically about the first 2 pages. The rest of the pages, the rest of the 1800 items are probably not too much concern in terms of the negatives. Again, half of that total is 250, so anything which is 250 and above are things you probably want to avoid. Things like milk sugar are interesting, high beef diet, berberine. Often you'll find the list things which are commonly advocated by internet influencers as being good and healthy. They are for some people, they may not be for you. Okay, I think at this point in time I'll shut up and see about getting this up.